we're at a public forum, so I'm not going to call anybody out, but I do feel as if, and I'll bet you would agree with this because you've basically shown this within the vegan community. There are people who don't seem to, just genuinely don't want to debate. They genuinely don't want to have their ideas challenged, and exactly what their motivations are behind why they do that doesn't get elucidated very easily if there can be multiple reasons for them to turn down a debate. So if you bring it down to there's only one reason for them to turn down a debate, and that's that they just straight up don't want to do it because they can't face it, because they can't face what you're going to bring up via logic and reasoning and so forth, not by name calling or anything of this kind.
Yeah, but this is already. I've already tried that with all of these people. With all these people, I've been very. I've tried it the respectful way. Carnivore MD's been dodging me when I was very respectful. He's been dodging me for a long time now. He's going to try to play it off right now, like it's because I'm rude to him. That anyone who knows the history there knows that that's nonsense. He's dodging me for a whole bunch of time before any of this stuff came up. Same thing with Tucker Goodrich, by the way. He'll never come to me on voice, regardless of how respectful I am, because he knows he's going to get destroyed. Same with Carnivore MD. So at this point, I could not care less. Could not care less. Anyway, I couldn't care less about the tone policing conversation. So, here's my question. Like, I understand getting into the actual issue I give a shit about. Now, you don't have to explain to me that there could be a discordance between ApoB and LDL, Dave. I know that. And I know that someone who has higher ApoB and low LDL can have a higher risk than someone who has, all things considered equal, an LDL that is high, but ApoB that is lower than the one with the high ApoB and low LDL. Like, I get that. Okay. It still is, I understand all that completely. It still is not relevant to the question. The question, like, for example, you can have a car with a bomb in it, and I can ask, is the car with a bomb in it driving over to the house, is that causal to the house exploding? Now, you can say that, well, if there was a case where the house had more bombs in it that weren't brought there by cars, that can have a higher risk. That's true, it can. That doesn't address the question. It doesn't address the question of is the car with the bomb in it causal to the house exploding? Now, in the case of LDL, like LDL has ApoB on it. Like, yeah, it's true that other things can have ApoB on it. It's completely true. Still doesn't answer the question. The question is...
Yeah, I'll answer your question on the car bomb. Yeah. It absolutely is a participant in the exploding of the house. Let's assume there's no bombs in the house. And a car with a bomb in it comes to a house, and then the house explodes, and we go and investigate it, and sure enough, inside the house are bomb fragments from what we know is the parts of the bomb. So per your analogy, I totally agree.
The fact that the car didn't blow the house up itself, rather the bomb explains the house blowing up better. It doesn't change the fact that the question of does that whole system of car plus bomb, is that a causal factor to the house exploding? The coherent answer is still yes. It just is. Yes, there may be more accurate ways of modeling it, sure. More accurately saying, okay, well, let's take the car out of the equation. Really, what it's all about is that the bomb didn't get there. Not sure. But the answer, the coherent answer to the question is still yes. That system does play a causal role. Yeah, my question to you is really simple. Good, awesome. So my question is really simple. So in the context of what's going on with, so a few questions. In the context of someone with triglycerides less than 100, HDL over 50, does LDL play a causal role? What do you have a belief in regards to LDL playing a causal role for cardiovascular disease?
Okay, I think, by the way that you're phrasing it, my answer to that question, the LDL particles, are they participants in the process of atherosclerosis in that context, in low triglycerides and high HDL? The answer to that question is yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was not participants. They're causal. They're a causal factor. It's something that causes atherosclerosis.
Okay. Then we're going to need to actually define exactly what we mean by causal. So, like in the case of the bomb in the car, is it the bomb that blew up? That actually, that's really not a good analogy, because the problem with it is that we're going to keep coming back to whether or not the car driving over sets off the bomb, right? Is it a, maybe you want to use missile? Are LDL particles like missiles?
Let's say there's a certain percentage that a bomb. Look, I don't want to get bogged down into analogies. Like, what about me asking you about causal do you not understand? I just want to know that. Like, what about my question wasn't clear to you?
I don't think that there was anything that wasn't clear to me. Like, if you get atherosclerosis while having low triglycerides and high HDL, and you come to me and you say, hey, did this have anything to do with LDL particles? I would say, yes, it did. And if you said, does it have anything to do with the cholesterol that's on board LDL particles? I would say, yes, it probably does, yes.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that someone, in the context of high HDL and low triglycerides, do you think in that context that someone will have a higher risk of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease if they have a higher LDL versus a lower LDL? All else considered, like everything, except of course, let me put it to you this way. In that context, in the LMHR, sorry.
No worries.
In the LMHR context, if you were to like snap your fingers and generate more LDL molecules in someone's blood, or sorry, not particles, not molecules. If you were to generate more LDL particles in someone's blood just by snapping your fingers, but their triglycerides would still be under 100, and their HDL would still be over 50. Do you think that would increase the risk of cardiovascular disease? Let me ask it that way.
Okay. So this is a good question, because now what you're talking about the appearance of it that has nothing to do with metabolism, it has nothing to do with clearance. It's the magic wand analogy, as it were, right? But am I correct? It'd be like,
I see what you're saying. Okay, let me ask it this way. Let's say you had a diet plan, right?
What's wrong with that?
Okay,
what's
fine.
With that analogy?
Because I see where this is going. Now you're gonna say, well, okay, well, yes, but that may not translate to increased LDL through the diet. Is that where this is going?
No. The way you're asking it gets straight to the lipid hypothesis. It's exposure over time, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you had a machine that could magically teleport LDL particles into, say, my twin's body, and me and my twin, we ate the same, we slept the same, everything was exactly the same all the way through the rest of our lives, right? And this teleporter just magically could put the particles in, and there were no biomechanics involved as far as clearance or anything that was any different, then you would expect I would get greater atherosclerosis than my twin, right?
Sure. Yeah, I would.
Okay, that I don't know, and that I would genuinely wonder. I don't feel that.
Okay, cool. So that's fine. Your answer is okay. Fine, cool. So you're agnostic. Now here's my second question. Okay, if you had the same twin, and they both had triglycerides less than 100, HDL over 50, if you snap your fingers and cigarette smoke would appear in their lungs, do you have a belief that they would be at increased risk of atherosclerosis and or cardiovascular disease?
The cigarette smoke appeared in their lungs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's introducing toxicity, right? Read around that.
I don't know. Wait. It's introducing toxicity, but that doesn't mean it increases the risk of cardiovascular disease or. In some context, LDL can introduce toxicity. I don't know how you define the word toxicity. The question is, in this context, do you believe that introducing cigarette smoke
I'm sorry. Can you
specific disease?
Hold just 1 second. Sorry, Avi, can you hold just 1 second? 1 second.
Yeah.
Hello? Can I call you back? Let me
How long are you gonna? Can you get me an ATA?
Alright, bye.
Oh, you're talking to another person. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I had to answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So look. My question is, look.
If I smoke, am I going to increase my risk of cardiovascular?
In the context of LMHR, in the context of the low triglycerides, triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you say yes in terms of one. Okay, hold on. So you said yes in the one context. You said yes to that question. You said I don't know to the other question. So my question to you is, why do you have no belief in one answer for one question? Why do you have no belief? In the other case, you do have a belief. What's the symmetry breaker between the smoking and in the LMHR context and LDL in the LMHR context, for which you believe that smoking is causal, and you're not sure if LDL is causal in that context? What's the difference between the two?
I think what smoking brings, such as greater oxidative stress, can be highly associated, I believe, is causal toward its greater degree of atherosclerosis. Do you believe oxidative stress increases atherosclerosis?
Not necessarily. It depends. I think that actually is, if you were to say one thing that is very context dependent, I think that oxidative stress is very context dependent to whether it would cause atherosclerosis. But
I agree. Those make reason promote.
No. Context, not just dose, but context is important with oxidative stress. I don't think just because something has oxidative stress that it follows that you should have this belief that it will cause cardiovascular. I think that's actually a really weak mechanistic speculation. And even if you were to have that leading belief, it would be very, very weak. But regardless, I don't see why. So do you take the view that LDL increasing LDL doesn't increase your risk of oxidative stress?
Yeah, I would be very interested in any data that shows LDL particles independently result in greater oxidative stress, absent what the means by which you increase the LDL particles work. So if you do it by giving them, say, an atherogenic diet, for which they would get atherogenesis regardless of whether their LDL particles went higher or not, then you have to wonder where the cost of correction is.
Right? You could say the same thing for smoking, though. For smoking, it's not clear that smoking increases oxidative stress in people, irrespective of all the other confounders that go along with smoking. I mean, there's no in vivo experiment in humans suggesting that smoking increases oxidative stress, irrespective of the way smoking, these interventions are done, or not even interventions, because they're not even any interventions, they're observational. The best we have is this mechanistic petri dish shit, or mouse or animal data that's not even human. So if your criticism
there were animal models, I thought there were animal models on this. Maybe I'll have to review the literature.
Well, no. I said or animal models, which aren't humans.
Okay.
I mean, if you wanna hang your head on that and that makes the difference, I guess that's fine. But it's going to be a really weak inference if you want to go by rat data or something.
Okay.
I mean, that's gonna be.
Animal models have the limits of what animal models have. You were asking what I believe.
Okay, wait. Okay, so now I'll ask you. Okay, so do you have a strong? Okay, so I'll ask it this way. So you're saying, okay, so in one case, smoking increases oxidative stress as demonstrated by animal models. Oxidative stress increases risk of CVD. That's all very, very tenuous, by the way. That's not. I don't even think that's accepted. I think oxidative stress and inflammation, it's incredibly heterogeneous and even in things like inflammation, there's a whole bunch of different anti-inflammatories that have been tried for CBD, a whole bunch of antioxidants that have been tried for CBD, and it really hasn't panned out, by the way. It just has this idea that oxidative stress increases atherosclerosis and CBD. I just need data. Then I need you to, if you're going to hinge a symmetry breaker on that, I need you to show me the data that oxidative stress increases the risk of CVD.
Okay. I'm interested if I am wrong in that assumption, and at some point I'll look into where in animal models or if better yet, people that we can actually observe other means of increase of oxidative stress to extraordinary degrees would result in increased
extraordinary degrees. I don't even, okay, so here's the question now. So they say that, okay, so here's what, like, based on this image maker, here's all the,
extraordinary is not ordinary. So
so anything, okay,
what objection
it
do you
can
have
be,
to extraordinary?
no, extraordinary, I don't have an objection, I wanted clarification, Dave, Dave, I didn't have an objection to your use of the word, I just wanted clarification. Because people say that word extraordinary in two different ways. Some people say extraordinary is in like, oh, if you dial up the dose all the way. Some people say extraordinary is the way you did. Well, it's just not normal, not a norm. Okay, so if you're trying to posit the symmetry breaker as, okay, LDL, increasing LDL does not increase risk of oxidative stress. Increasing smoke in your lungs will increase oxidative stress, and the degree that happens has been shown to increase risk of cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis. If you have that data, then you have some form of symmetry breaker to have a leaning one way or not the other way. I agree with you. Although not a very strong belief. You wouldn't have if you had like this confident belief that smoking increases your risk of, in the LMHR context, if you would say, yes, it does. Like, I wouldn't say it like that. I would say, I kind of lean that way is the way I would answer that question. But I'd like to see the data that you can even lean that way. Because I'm not sure that you can even have a leaning that way, based on the data on oxidative stress and atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. Because there are a lot of antioxidants that have been tried for prevention of cardiovascular disease, and the whole thing is on the large part a wash. Like, it doesn't seem to prevent people from getting cardiovascular disease in any of the trials when they're vaccinated.
Hold on, dude.
Yeah.
You're talking about an intervention against what is already a highly oxidative environment? Like, are these people who already had high oxidative,
primary or secondary? Like, it can be for primary or secondary prevention. You're free to show me. You're free to show me. Okay, sure.
I'm just saying, I want to be sure we're talking about the same thing. I'm saying I think.
I don't know. The answer to that is I don't know if it's just in highly oxidative environments or if it's in highly oxidative environments or not. Either way, look, regardless of which, the burden of proof will be on you to show the symmetry breaker you're asserting. I mean, I'm just doing this as like as just letting you know what the data I've already seen, and I don't know if.
I hear you. I do want to be sure that if you're because I know you mean to restate my argument in an intellectually honest way. I do want to correct something, though. The issue that we have, the one that we would love to solve, is that we don't have the magic wand capability. I wish that we did it. I wish that we had the ability to simply reverse apheresis.
We don't have it in either context, though. I mean, do we?
That we have like the ability to add oxidative stress in a magic wand sort of way. Correct. We don't. Right? You're asking me what I believe. I'm asserting what it is that I believe.
Let me see what the symmetry breaker is. Like, if you're saying what you believe in one context and you're saying you don't have a belief on the other. So I'm just asking why you have a belief in one context and not another. I mean, you gave me an answer. You said that there will be increased oxidative stress with smoking and not with increased LDL. And then you said that increased oxidative stress will increase risk of cardiovascular disease and or atherosclerosis. And I just want the data substantiating that.
Right, because you feel that there is data that is substantiating that there's greater oxidative stress that comes with greater introduction of a higher concentration of LDL particles. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm agnostic about that. I don't know. I've heard it. I haven't done it, but I have heard that introduction of LDL per se, maybe beyond a certain level. I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if it's true. I don't even know, to be honest, how much of a degree smoking will increase oxidative stress and by what metric you're measuring it. And I don't know if that degree by what metric you're measuring it will translate into cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis. I think a lot of times oxidative stress is a buzzword that gets thrown around, and a lot of people in the nutrition there throw around the term oxidative stress, like they know what they're talking about. But when you actually get into it, very, very few times they actually know what the fuck they're talking about. So.
And by the way, I agree with you on that. I myself had only heard of oxidative stress as it relates to smoking from doctors before this point in time. I hadn't actually looked into it that deeply, which is, again, what I want to concede up front. You had brought up smoking as one analogy, and I wanted to bring up why it is that I think that might be relevant in this context. But that's not me saying, and this is also my wheelhouse. Smoking is also something I'm an expert in. It's definitely not, right?
So then what I would say, yeah, go ahead. Go finish.
We should bring this back to LDL. And what I think will be very meaningful to you in helping to kind of understand where I'm coming from, and therefore, of course, being able to attack my position on it, which is LDL is an acute phase reactant. It can, in fact, like many other proteins, rise in the course of a circumstance like an inflammatory response. So what I'm very interested in is in being able to disentangle how much LDL levels rise as part of an existing problem that is, in fact, really more related to the cause of the actual atherosclerosis than the LDL particles.
No, I understand the statement, but this
cells are participants in the atherosclerosis. Because that's very key.
I get that.
That's why the magic wand analogy. That's why the magic wand analogy is a good analogy, because then we're saying, hey, we're taking out whatever could have been the original cause for the inflammatory response in the first place, and just straight introducing it, which is why diet reduces higher level LDL.
I understand all of that, but ultimately, regardless of all of that, whether you take that view or not, it still remains the case that there's a symmetry breaker that needs to be accounted for, presumably, if you have different beliefs. If you don't, if you can't find a symmetry breaker, then I would encourage you to not have different beliefs about the question. Because
I don't see how you feel different beliefs. Explain to me
Sure, I can. So I asked you the question, in the elementary context, does smoking increase risk of cardiovascular disease? And you said that you have the belief that it does. And then I asked you, in the elementary context, does increasing your LDL with the magic wand increase your risk of cardiovascular disease? And then you told me that you didn't have the belief that it does. You had no belief either way.
I have to correct you on this. You didn't say in the LMHR context. You were just talking about LDL particles outside the LMHR context, and then you added in afterwards the addition of the HDL and the triglycerides. But I hadn't actually answered that question yet. I'd be happy to answer that.
Wait. What question? Hold on, because I asked you. So let me just ask you right now. Look, I said, okay, so let's do it like this. Let's just be really clear.
I think I know the question that you would like to ask me. I think the question you would like to ask me is there something special about having low triglycerides and high HDL that gives you greater cardiovascular benefit or lower risk?
No, that's not. No, I would not like to ask you that question. The question I would like to ask you is in the context of triglycerides under 100, and in the context of HDL over 50, do you believe that increasing that person's LDL will increase their risk of atherosclerosis and or cardiovascular disease? Yes or no? Or you don't know? Or you have no belief?
Okay, via the magic wand scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, no, I don't know, but I would be leaning against no, that it doesn't.
Oh, you would be leaning against or toward no that it doesn't?
I'd be leaning against that it increases cardiovascular disease risk and within reasonable metrics. So sure, if you getting back to the extraordinary aspect, let's say that you change LDLP to 200,000, well then yeah, I believe it'll increase risk across everything, right? What I think you're wanting to say is if you were to change the LDL particle count from let's say 1,000 to 3,000 nanomoles, do I think that independently in and of itself will likely result in it? No, that's where my term cautious comes from.
Cool. Now, my second question is, in the context of triglycerides under 100 and HDL over 50, do you have the belief that introducing an extraordinary, and by extraordinary I just mean out of the ordinary, amount of smoke in a person's lungs over time will increase the risk of atherosclerosis and or cardiovascular disease?
Now, when you say introduce, like they're smoking, or they're not smoking? Can you be more specific? Like, do you mean
Okay,
cigarettes?
let's do it like
You mean
this.
cigarette smoke?
Cigarette, yeah, cigarette smoke.
Can we say like 3 packs a day's worth of cigarette smoke?
Oh no, I mean we don't even have to go there. A couple of cigarettes a day. I believe there's clear data that the answer is yes for that as well.
I don't know about a couple cigarettes a day. I think I would go.
You really wouldn't have a belief? Wait, hold on, David. I just want to answer the question. 1 second. So if I said 3 cigarettes a day, do you not have a belief of whether that will increase someone's risk of cardiovascular disease and or atherosclerosis?
I don't know enough to have an opinion on 3 cigarettes a day. I do know enough to have an opinion on 3 packs of cigarettes a day. Or at least I feel like it. Again, this isn't my normal wheelhouse. But would I speculate that somebody I would believe that somebody smoking 3 packs a day will have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease due to what results from smoking.
Okay, in the context of 3 cigarettes a day, do you lean against it causing cardiovascular disease?
I genuinely don't know. 3 cigarettes a day may not even, I don't know, it may not even activate hormesis in a beneficial way if that was possible. I have no idea. I don't know about 3 cigarettes.
Okay, so you don't know, you're completely agnostic in one context, and you're leaning against it in another context. So that is a different belief, by the way. So you do have different beliefs in 2 different
You're
contexts.
saying mine not being able to quantify 3 cigarettes a day given the existing research that
No, I don't think you're even able to do it. I don't think you're even able to do it for 3 packs. I don't think you're able to do it for 3 packs either.
Technically, they're different doxastic states, not different beliefs. That one of them.
Sorry, different doxastic states. Making all these new errors. Okay, yeah, you have a different doxastic state. And I can ask the question.
I don't know what stochastic state means.
Isaac is the. I just picked doxastic. Towards something, like a belief related attitude towards something. What do you take it to be, Isaac?
It's like attitudes about truth or falsity, but it's broader than agnosticism in that it includes the absence of belief.
Attitudes about truth. Okay, so you have a doxastic. You have something.
Sorry, I misspoke. It's broader than belief in that it includes agnosticism. So, like belief, you're just gonna have.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like that's true or false. If you say doxastic states, then you can include agnosticism, which isn't a belief.
Gotcha. Okay, so you have a doxastic state. Agnostic
Sound far away, Avi. You kind of
Sorry,
seem to
am I-
be going far away and back again. Go ahead.
Am I good now? Okay.
Yeah.
So
good.
if you're agnostic, so doxastic state, you can be agnostic about some. It includes the disjunction of agnostic, lean towards, lean against, believe, disbelieve. Like it subsumes all of those things. Fine.
So it's like way more of a.
Yeah. Okay. So
This is.
I mean, I can. No. I'm gonna bring it back. No, we're gonna bring it back. I can ask you about the 3-pack. So the 3-pack, you clearly have some sort of leaning toward it causing CBD, which you do.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one more time that I believe what results from smoking 3 packs a day will increase the risk that you develop atherosclerosis. Yes.
Okay, cool. And what results from waving the wand and increasing the LDL does not. In that context, in the triangle, yeah, that's your leaning.
Again, yes, leaning, yes. Again, I don't know. This is why we're doing the study.
But here's the thing, Dave. So here's the question. So
can I ask you something, Avi? So you've asked me a question. I want to ask you one question. What's going to be the
question? Yeah.
On our study?
What's going to be I think if done appropriately, and by appropriate, I just mean within the guidelines of of what has been done in any other robust.
We're getting CT angiograms at baseline, and then once again a year later, we may have other tests involved. Those are still being worked out.
And if it's well powered, and everything checks out, I would have a strong leaning. That you'll see a increased risk in those who have a higher LDL rather than those who have a lower LDL, even if you stratify them out by triglycerides and HDL, if it's well powered enough. I also would say that you probably.
I appreciate that. You're being very consistent. People with kids, children with homozygous FH develop tendon xanthomas at a very young age, a very large proportion of them. It's super unfortunate, and it's very dangerous. And they will also develop things like, say, stable anginas. And that too is extraordinarily concerning. This is something that we should be trying to detect as soon as humanly possible.
I'm not saying this is, just to be clear, I'm not saying the LMHRs are going to have the same risk as FH. Because well, not necessarily. That's not necessarily true at all. That's not the case that they should.
Why wouldn't
because
they existing within hypothesis?
Yeah, they may not, because the genes themselves can have certain pleiotropic effects, and I'd have to look into that. It could be that there's some amount of pleiotropic.
You're saying existing genes that are being used right now in the MR studies could have pleiotropic effects associated.
Oh, wait. Then I may have misunderstood. I thought you were just talking about a prospective cohort. Are you not talking about a prospective cohort? What do you mean? What
our stuff? Or are you talking about just in general?
I may just not be familiar with your study then. What's your study?
We're going to be getting CT angio scans at the, and then we're going to also get it 1 year later. And in an existing FH cohort with likewise levels of LD, but you would absolutely see a change in the geography of the, and actually, you've been very much in this literature lately. I'm sure you would likely agree, especially where there's any detected plaque at the baseline. You would absolutely expect a change in the morphology, right?
Yes.
So you're getting CTAs, and I just want to understand the methodology. You're getting CTAs at baseline and follow-up with the LMHRs, and you're getting CTAs at baseline and follow-up of people who have familial hypercholesterolemia.
No, we already have access to that.
Oh, you're just going to compare it. So do you have like a comparator group? Do you have a comparator group that includes like people who have the low triglycerides, high HDL, and normal LDL? Or are you just going to take LMHRs and just compare them to FH people that have already been done?
We're going to be comparing them to potentially lots of groups. FH is definitely one of them because they're going to be the closest comparison when looking at LDL alone.
Okay, so that's the question. If your question is with respect to that, my answer is I actually lean that the homozygous FH people are probably going to have a higher risk than the LMHR people. And the reason for that is there are factors that are independent of LDL. I have the suspicion there are factors that are independent of LDL that may have a role to play to increase the risk. For example, the reason they have high LDL, so that answers your question. Now, if you're asking me with respect to normal individuals, I'm going to answer, and by normal I mean individuals, everything else equal except that they have the lower LDL instead of higher LDL, even though they also have the low triglycerides and high HDL. I'm going to say that that my strong leaning is that the LMHRs are going to have an increased risk at atherosclerosis progression rather than those who have LDL. That's my answer to your question. Yeah. Can I go back? Do you have other questions for me, or is there any other?
Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask one more question. How much?
Sure.
Like, do you think it'll be a 10% increase, a 25% increase, or do you think it'll be closer to, like, say, less than 5%?
What's the duration of the study?
1 year.
Oh, 1 year.
Yeah, let me emphasize something. It's not just 1 year, but it's 1 year with a cohort that's going to have at least an LDL of, say, 250 or higher average is my guess. I can't say I know for sure until we've done our recruitment. So there'll be at least heterozygous FH on their way to homozygous. Actually, I think that's about a halfway point in between. So
what's the average age? What's the average LDL for your? Do you know if you haven't done it yet? But do you?
Until we recruit.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so what I can do is I can look at the plaque progression estimates per LDL exposure time, and I can give you my precise estimate. It'll probably, if your follow-up time is only 1 year, you may only see like maybe a 1% difference in atheroma volume. You may not actually see impressive results then.
I'm actually genuinely interested in your analogy, or sorry, your analysis of this, because I would like to get what your best guess is, but I do want your honest guess. I don't want you to set expectations. I want it to be what you think it might be.
Well, that's what I've been giving you.
No, I know.
Everything I've been giving you, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because I think if you're going to run a study for 1 year, its plaque progresses slowly is the thing. Its natural course takes time. In fact, one of the reasons...
It's the existing...
No, it is. No, it is. I understand, Dave. You don't have to explain it to me. I understand. Even in people who have high... Like, yes, you may have a dose... Of course, you do have a dose times time. And you may be able to multiply that slowness. And you may be able to get 2% rather than 3%. I don't know if it multiplies linearly or not. I don't know. Wait, hold on.
2017 EAS study has homozygous FH in it as its far end to help establish that dose response, right? So that's what I'm saying. The EAS. Sorry, go ahead.
Regardless, what I'm trying to tell you is everything I've seen, every trial I've seen, following people with medium, low, high LDL, and seeing how quickly their plaques progress and how much they progress. I haven't seen responses like really impressive regression responses. It usually takes time. In fact, one of the reasons the latest trial that's published, the Evaporate trial, has been criticized because the results looked so quick. It was like remarkable. So what I can do on your question is I can review progression times. I can review progression patterns and try to see if I can get it as a function of LDL dot time, and I can get back with a more precise answer. But if you're asking me my honest thought right now, what the difference would be, I'd probably say about 1% in terms of mean plaque volume.
I don't think that's what you'll find when you do a review of the literature. And granted, I'm nowhere near your level on the review, but of what I have learned about existing FH, it shows to be quite much more substantial.
Oh, just to be clear, wait. Just to be clear, I'm asking a question in terms of comparing the LMHRs to LMHRs minus the LDL, minus the high LDL. I'm saying if you compare LMHRs for 1 year to LMHRs minus the LDL, so they're not LMHRs, they're just normal people with low triglycerides, high HDL, low LDL. I expect the mean difference in plaque progression to be about 1%. That's my feel for it right now without doing an analysis.
Okay. So with that said, Bobby, you would agree that the LMHRs, when compared to that cohort, are at risk, but their risk is just 1%. Like right now, that would be your opinion in 1 year.
For a follow-up of 1 year only, yes. My view right now, yeah. So they're going to be at risk, yeah. But not as there still can be very well below the average.
Because quite certainly a lot of people believe it's substantially more than that when compared to a likewise cohort. That the difference is going to be very large, and it's because LDL is considered to be independent and strongly associated with cardiovascular disease, much, much, much more than HDL and triglycerides. And I think that you're different, because I think you and I have already gone over the literature quite a bit privately. But I think that now...
I meant, yeah.
Factors.
No, I agree with you. People have different intuitions. I do agree that LDL is an independent risk factor. I do think it strongly correlates. and by correlation, I just mean the strength of the correlation. I'm not saying the magnitude of effect. But yes, no. If you were to, I also don't think HDL is even causal. I think it's just a correlate. I don't think it's a causal correlate. But anyway, regardless of all of that, no, I do think that.
I agree with that. One of the frustrating things is that it's so hard for me to get across to people that I'm interested in how much these lipid values are the result of something as opposed to the driver of something.
I understand, but I do have a stress that people should not expect LMHRs to be at this massively increased risk, like familial homozygous would be, compared to normal people. I think they will be at an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, all things considered equal. I absolutely do. I don't think the magnitude is as great as people make it out. But there's no question in my belief system. I do have the belief that people will be at an increased risk because of their increased LDL. Now, do you have any other questions for me, or can I return to my line of questioning?
No, you can return to your line of question. I feel like we can almost finish this off, or at least.
Wait, Dave, look, here's my line of questioning.
No. I'm not trying to close the whole debate. I was saying close down that topic.
Oh, okay, close on this. Yeah. Okay. So we ended up with the okay. So going back to my line of questioning, you have different toxastic states, and we can even go to 3 packs of cigarettes. I think you have different toxastic states even with
Avi, I'm going to concede that I'm not going to do well with these formal logic statements. I haven't spent.
So let's just make it colloquial. You have a different belief. You have a different leaning of belief when it comes to the cigarette, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, cardiovascular disease, than LDL and cardiovascular disease.
I think that there's a different degree of risk likelihood, yes.
Yeah. Now, do you have any reason, I'm asking you if you have any reason to justify that difference of belief, or that accounts for that difference of belief?
Between the smoking and the magic wand version of higher LDL?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I believe a certain degree, and I don't know how much, I believe a certain degree of higher LDL is observed in the data as a result of something that actually can be traced back to the true root cause of atherosclerosis in that given context. Again, I'm not making a quantitative, entirely categorical claim. I'm stating plainly that, for example, you can have something like, say, diabetes, results in atherogenic dyslipidemia, and I believe some amount of an increase in LDL. I don't know how much, and I don't know in how many cases. But to what degree that increase in LDL is actually as a result of the diabetes and how much it's changing the lipid profile, I believe that's relevant. And I want to be...
Say hypothetically, there may be some amount of atherosclerosis that somehow causes people to smoke. There may be some sort of reverse causation there. Like, people who have atherosclerosis, for whatever reason, say hypothetically, just for the sake of the argument, it turns out that they were more likely to...
Right?
Yeah. Right. So if you're going to say that's the difference... Yeah, if you're going to say that's... Well, I'll say more than that. Let's say that there really just is something about atherosclerosis per se, having atherosclerosis per se, that maybe it's some kind of interaction with the lipids in the brain or something that just makes people more likely to get cigarette smoke in their bodies.
Okay.
In that case,
I'm not laughing dismissively. I think it's actually a fun...
Yeah.
I think it's actually thought
in that thought experiment, would you then say that you lean against smoking in the LMHR? Well, by LMHR, just to be clear, just mean low triglycerides, high HDL, the 50 and 100 cutoff. I understand it's more than that because it's a high LDL response, but whatever. My question is, in that context, would you say that you would lean against smoking causing cardiovascular disease if there was some reason to speculate about some reverse causality there?
Can I again just restate, only because I'm very careful with the word causal, can I again restate that I believe that which smoking is resulting in to be part of the cause of atherosclerosis? but I don't think you're literally putting cigarettes into the atherosclerotic plaques. So I'm sure we both agree.
No, I get that. I understand that you're not putting cigarettes into the atherosclerotic plaques or smoke into the atherosclerotic plaques.
But the steps between when you smoke and what ultimately results in the development of an atheroma, that's a very complex thing that I'm sure both you and I would agree is not fully elucidated. But
sure, but I do think it's causal. We all, yeah. So do you.
Yeah, that thing that's not yet fully determined, do we think it's causal? Yeah. Right, exactly. But that's
okay. So, but wait. So in the hypothetical context, would you also say that? Because you gave me
in other words, let me see if I can restate what I think you're asking me. Do I think it's possible that a higher concentration of LDL particles may not themselves result in atherosclerosis, but like with cigarette smoking, may result in something that results in atherosclerosis, right? That's what you're asking?
I'm not sure if can you say that again? Sorry.
Okay. If you wanted to make a likewise comparison with what I just said with smoking, could you be asking, do I think it's possible that an increase in LDL particles themselves, just by themselves, could result in something that then results in a greater risk of atherosclerosis?
No, I'm not. That's not my even where the conversation is.
I was just trying to help.
No. It's okay. No, because the conversation is you gave us symmetry breaker. That's someone else. I'm in the city. Because you offered a symmetry breaker, right? You offered a breaker. The breaker you offered was that you have reason to believe. The reason you lean against LDL causing atherosclerosis, but you lean in favor of cigarette smoke causing atherosclerosis was that you have reason to speculate that there may be some reverse causality, that high LDL may be a result of atherosclerosis.
Can I correct you?
And now oh yeah, sure.
Because we didn't get into the why. The why is I believe that the reason lean mass responders have higher LDL is because they're trafficking more VLDL for this distribution of of triglycerides.
Of triglycerides. Yeah, no, I understand. I know the energy model, right?
Yeah. Okay, good. So this is kind of important.
No, I understand why. But that doesn't address the question.
Dave, do you understand why he's asking you this? Do you understand what he's getting at with this line of questioning?
Isaac, if you don't mind, I'd just like to finish this because we're talking two categories.
I think to be totally fair, I think that you aren't understanding why he's asking you this. Do you understand why he's asking you this line of questioning?
Go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I think that it's like you guys are talking past each other. I'm sure everyone in here has observed it. It's been happening repeatedly on this question. What he's trying to do is he's trying to understand if your epistemic standard is consistent, if the way that you're forming beliefs about things is consistent, logically consistent. He's asking you, he's giving you two situations where you're making a different evaluation under the same circumstances, and he's asking you what accounts for it. Right? That's what he's trying to figure out. It's like if you say that there's 2 days, right? And you wear brown shoes on one, and you wear green shoes on the other. And he wants to know, why are you opting in this one context to wear brown shoes, right? If you say in response to that, well, it's a Monday. But it turns out that you examined both days and they're both Mondays, yet on the other one you're wearing green shoes. Well, it's not the fact that it's Monday that accounts for why you're wearing the one shoes, or the brown shoes in the one case and the green shoes in the other, right? So what he's trying to get you to do is lay out some consistent feature by which we're able to tell which belief, whether you'll form the belief or have the leaning or not. Do you understand what I mean? Surely, Avi, that's what you're doing. Am I accurate?
Yes. No. That's exactly. That's why I asked. That's why I asked the hypothetical. Yeah.
We're missing each other's points. Yeah.
You should just let me finish what I was saying then, because this effectively gets to that. Because if you believe that something is independently causal, full stop, then the reason for its introduction becomes less relevant to what its actual detected levels are. So if there are different things that result in your lipid levels changing, and that which results in the lipid levels changing also have any impact on atherosclerosis? That becomes relevant to answering the question as to whether or not that change in those lipid levels is actually the cause, or whether the lipid levels themselves are the cause. You understand what I'm saying?
I think it's a false dichotomy. Actually, I think it could be both. Just like with smoking.
I agree it can be both. I completely agree.
Okay. I'll still not going to answer the question. So my question is, what accounts for the difference in your belief?
What accounts for my difference in belief of what?
Well, you, in the context of smoking in an LMHR context, you told me that you had the leaning of belief that it will increase the risk of CVD or atherosclerosis, okay. And in the context of LDL, in the LMHR, by LMHR I just mean low triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50. That you lean against it, you clearly have a difference in belief. My question to you is, why do you lean one way in one context and the other way in the other context?
Okay, well then this was already gone over. I was speculating on oxidative stress. You feel differently. You feel that it's not.
Okay, yeah. Wait, that's fine. That's cool. No, that's fine. I just want to know if you could substantiate that that's an actual thing we can speculate over. Like, do you have any data that? Do you have any data like that?
I'm not. Again, smoking's not my wheelhouse. This is speculation. I'm happy to look after we've had this discussion. But to answer the key question that both you and Isaac brought up, that I think is fair to totally unpack, I think that there is a dose makes the poison aspect to oxidative stress. I think
that wasn't the.
Sorry.
Look, the key question was you just answered. You just answered the key question. You answered the key question. That was the key question. Okay, oxidative stress. I just want to know if. Yeah. So, but you're saying, okay, the difference.
I don't want to get cornered into saying, okay, Dave is saying smoking causes oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is the only thing that results. It's what I'm saying is I think that is one thing that may be something that can be looked at. But even then, not my wheelhouse. I have to look into the research to find out. That's just what I expect.
And then the other thing is, if it turns out, I understand you have the belief because you may have. Wait, I'm getting an echo, Dave. Is there something you can? Okay. Or I don't know if it's you or if it's someone else.
Not me.
Someone else is. Okay, cool.
It is through Dave's mic. It's just you're talking louder. I think that's
okay. Why. Cool.
I can adjust it a little bit on my side. Continue talking loud.
So yeah. So what I would say is that if you have a symmetry breaker that you can't substantiate, actually is a symmetry breaker. So presumably the symmetry breaker is that we have some reason to believe that smoking causes oxidative stress. Oxidative stress causes CBD. And we don't have some reason to believe LDL causes oxidative stress. That would be a symmetry breaker, I agree. But we would need some reason to believe that the symmetry breaker is actually there. Now, I just want to know if you have any reason to believe that symmetry breaker is actually there. So do you have any reason to believe that smoking causes oxidative stress, and the degree of oxidative stress that smoking causes actually does cause atherosclerosis or CVD?
I don't know how many times I can repeat this. It's a speculative answer based on an analogy you brought up earlier. I myself don't know until I go and look into the research based on my very surface level area of understanding on smoking. I thought that there was an increase in oxidative stress. Could be wrong about that. I'll look to see what the research already shows, and particularly in let's say animal models for which they have exposure, and see if in fact there is this dose response exposure over time, for which if there's just higher levels of smoke, you end up with higher levels of oxidative stress, and that whether or not that oxidative stress correlates with cardiovascular disease, and for that matter, whether or not higher oxidative stress correlates with cardiovascular disease outside of smoking. In which case, I would consider it to be at a dose level, particularly at a high dose level, to be something that would be concerning.
Cool. But in the meantime, since you don't have a reason, it seems like you don't have a reason to believe the symmetry breaker you're asserting is there is actually there. And you're saying that you don't look to see if there is a reason.
What do you mean I don't have a reason? Like I've explained what my reason
You
is.
said you've said you're speculating it, but you've offered no reason to believe it's there. You're saying that in one context this is there, in another context it's not there. And then when asked to provide a reason for why there's a difference in what's there and what's not there, you just said that you're speculating and you don't know.
Okay, now you just lost me. Let me read.
I can definitely help with that. Just picture the shoe analogy again, right? You wear brown shoes on one day. It really is going to clear it up though, Dave. Like, you wear brown shoes on one day, you wear green shoes on the other day. And then Audie asks, well, what accounts for why you wear brown and green shoes? What's the difference? What is it that's true of the day you wear green shoes? That if it were true of the day you wear brown shoes, you'd be wearing green shoes instead. And you say, oh, well, I mean, I don't really know, but it's probably the fact that it's a Monday. So then Audie says, okay, well, I mean, that could totally be the difference. So, like, do you have any evidence that it was, in fact, a Monday when you were wearing green shoes? And you're like, well, I'd have to go, do my research and see if there's any reason to believe it. It's like, wait, but if that's your answer, then you shouldn't be putting forward that the fact that it's Monday is why you're wearing green shoes. You should just say, I honestly don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't have the belief one way or the other about why I was wearing green shoes. Maybe I shouldn't have it. You're right.
Yeah. Thank you for clearing that up. That's exactly the point. It's nail on the head.
Okay. Can you restate what it is that you and I disagree on? Because I'm honestly now more lost than I was when we started. Maybe this will be easier. Maybe this will be easier. I think oxidative stress as it goes up will increase the likelihood of cardiovascular disease pretty much outside of any context. I think that you could be a good exerciser and have all the right nutrients and so on and so forth. You're going to see a high rate of cardiovascular disease with a high level of, at least an extraordinary and at high level. Let's say that you're at the 99th percentile for detected oxidative stress given a certain assay. Then I think that you're probably going to have a likewise high level of cardiovascular disease. Now, lean mass hyperresponders, they're going to definitely be in the 99th percentile for the population, right? So they should be at a high risk for cardiovascular disease. And if they're not at a high risk for cardiovascular disease, then the question becomes, what's different? And we want to understand that. I think we all do, right? And if what you're ultimately asserting is that, hey, wait a sec, if you look at people who have low triglycerides and high HDL, but who have low LDL cholesterol, are they generally speaking going to end up with lower resulting atherosclerosis? This is already something I've talked about many, many times before. And again, if what you're trying to say is, I want the likelihood of my dying of cardiovascular disease to be as low as possible, then yes, you should try to get your LDL as low as you possibly can. You will die of something that's not cardiovascular disease.
None of this is answering the issue. None of this is the issue there. Like, this is, I don't see the relevance.
Why would people with a high LDL have a low risk of cardiovascular disease? Is my question to you. Why would people with the 99%?
Because LDL is not the only. Because LDL, I'll answer that, although it's irrelevant to what I'm getting at. The reason is because LDL is not the only risk factor, and it's not the only interplay to cardiovascular disease. There are other things that you can optimize, and you can mitigate the risk through other means. Now, all things considered, if they got their LDL down too, they would be at even less risk, is what I believe. But
so
I don't
why
believe
not look at the population? If there are other things that are more relevant to risk, why not look at populations that take everything?
I don't know. Wait. I don't know if there. I don't know. I don't know if there are other things that are more relevant. I just don't know if there could be other things that are relevant, but I don't know if any individual factor is more relevant or less relevant. I don't know how to quantify that. But I mean, I do know how to quantify it.
But you agree it's important. You agree it's important.
Of course. There are other factors. Of course, Dave. I'm not going to disagree with that. Look, maybe other factors. Yeah.
Why would we
what?
And allow for that stratified to get, or allow for everybody to be brought together without the stratification?
He so politely answered all of your questions, right? But every time he pushes you into this corner, you start trying to take the line of questioning. You should let him complete his line of questioning. He's going down two tracks, okay? Either it's you give the symmetry breaker, Or you just admit you don't have one, and then either take the same attitude in both cases, or admit to epistemic inconsistency. That's what he wants from you, and you keep trying to get away from it.
Right. No, it's true, Dave. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is not any of these things. I'm happy to answer these questions, and I think you'll find that I have answers that are pretty satisfactory to you. In fact, so far, it seems like they have been. But the heart of the issue is not any of it. The heart of the issue is just, I think your epistemic way of evaluating forming beliefs is inconsistent. You asked me in the beginning of this discussion on Twitter, what exactly is logically inconsistent? And now this is the heart of the issue. I think you have an epistemic method of evaluating and forming beliefs that are not consistent. And the specific inconsistency I'm pushing you on is with respect to smoke and CBD, cigarette smoke, CBD, improvements under LDL. Now, you said it is consistent because there's a symmetry breaker. The symmetry breaker is oxidative stress.
I've never said anything about symmetry breaker. Just say in layman's terms what is exactly inconsistent about it.
Yeah, you have a belief that in one context, that LDL is not causing CBD. In the same context, cigarette smoke.
Your mic is fucked, dude. You need to get closer to your mic.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Dave's being too flexible. You need to just yell at Avi to get near fucking microphone.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Plug that mic.
Okay. So, the inconsistency is that in one context, you say that you believe, you lean towards LDL not causing CVD, and in the other context, in the same context, with smoking, you lean toward it causing CVD. So in one context, for the LMHR context, you lean toward LDL not causing CVD. For the LMHR context, you lean toward smoking causing CVD. So you have different leanings and beliefs for these two different things. Now my question to you,
what you're receiving in my position is wrong. I said at the very beginning, and I've said on Twitter, that I believe ApoB containing lipoproteins are participants in the atherosclerotic process. I've said that several times over. I
prefer that's wrong. What did I just say that's wrong? Wait, I agree with that, but no, it's not what
the LDL does not cause atherosclerosis. I said
wait, that's not my question. All right, look, the magic wand question was the following. All right, because you've said yes to this many, many times. The magic wand question was, if you wave the magic wand for someone who has triglycerides 100 or less or HDL 50 or above, you wave the magic wand and LDL goes up, okay? Does that increase the risk of atherosclerosis? Now, you said that you lean toward it not.
Lean towards it not. Now, do you understand what the difference in what you said with whether it's a participant in atherosclerosis or whether the particle count at a concentration level is different, what the difference of that is? Because it's important for us moving forward. We need to understand each other on this aspect. One is the total concentration gradient in the bloodstream. The other is whether or not it's a participant. I've got a good analogy. It's people dying of blades, right? People can die of blades from being stabbed, or they can die ultimately of blades from having surgery, right? You would agree with this analogy, so
I understand. I mean, if what you're getting at is that LDL just has ApoB and ApoB is the participating factor, is that what you're getting at here?
I'm saying if you could take all the LDL particles out of my body, I would not die of atherosclerosis. Like, if you want me to see that, I can do that.
No, that's not my question, though. That wasn't my question.
I'm gonna make a diagram. Can I just the two situations? The one, can you just lay out the criteria on the two situations?
Yeah. So here,
and smoking or something.
Triglyceride. Okay. Triglyceride. Here's question one. Triglycerides over 100, HDL under 50.
Try over 100.
I messed up. Triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50. Okay?
Yep.
Now, the question is, wave a magic wand, more LDL appears in the blood. Okay?
Wait, there's another one? Sorry, say that again.
You wave the magic wand, and more LDL appears in the blood.
Okay.
It's not a separate one. In that context, in the context of triglyceride, under 100, HDL over 50, you wave the magic wand, and more LDL appears in the blood.
Yep.
Now the question is, does that increase risk of CVD? Okay?
Yep, and the other is if smoke
The
appears.
Yeah, if you wave the magic wand and smoke appears in the person's lungs.
Okay, and then
Does
the
that increase
question,
risk of CVD?
so
Yeah.
two situations are the same, triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50. In one situation, LDL is added to the blood. In the other situation, smoke is added to the lungs. And the question asked in both cases is what?
Does that intervention of waving the wand increase risk of CVD?
Increase CVD risk. Okay, I'll make an image to sum this all up.
Right. Now, Dave has answered that in the case of waving the wand and the smoke appears, he leans toward it increasing risk, so he leans towards yes. And he's answered that in the case of LDL appearing, he leans towards no, that it doesn't increase risk. Am I misstating it? Your position at all?
Can I please clarify?
You can.
Let's-
Okay, sure.
Let's pretend for a moment that my assumption is right, totally uneducated as it is, that smoking ultimately results in higher oxidative stress. Let's say that I'm right about that. And let's say that I were to come back after this debate and I find a whole bunch of studies that indeed higher oxidative stress not only has an association with cardiovascular disease, but that there's no situation in which I'm able to find for which extraordinarily high oxidative stress, not preposterously high, but extraordinarily high levels of oxidative stress associated with cardiovascular disease. We can take the smoking aspect of this whole topic out of it because I think it only confuses the issue. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree that you'd have a symmetry breaker. I would agree that you'd have a symmetry breaker in that case. But since you don't, I don't like critique of you.
You're familiar with lipopolysaccharides?
They're actually not my wheel. They're actually not my wheelhouse. Lipopolysaccharides. I'm actually not. But so I don't know about them. I know some things about them, but I'm not familiar.
How about
I just want to answer. Wait, hold on. I just want to answer your question. I just want to finish answering your question. My critique of you here's my critique. Like you seem to be focusing on like, okay, well, if I had just had this data showing like, okay, fine, I may agree you have the symmetry breaker, but right now, Dave, I think my problem here is that your way of forming beliefs is inconsistent. That's my critique. Because you don't have the data right now. And since you don't have the data right now, you still are saying that this is a symmetry breaker that accounts for the difference in your beliefs, when you can't actually show that symmetry breaker is actually there. That's my problem. Whether the data is out there or not, and actually shows that it does or it doesn't, isn't relevant to that. The fact of the matter is, you don't have the data, you don't know the data, and yet you're forming the belief system based on that asserted symmetry breaker that you have no reason to believe.
What do I not have the data on? You're talking with lean mass hyperresponders? Because to that, I totally
No. I'm saying that you don't have the data that oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay. You don't have the data that smoking increases oxidative stress. And this is what, I'm not picking something, this is what you answered me with. This is the symmetry breaker you asserted. You asserted that
as I asserted it, I also qualified exactly what you're saying now.
But then why have the symmetry breaker to have different beliefs then?
You said it's not your wheelhouse, right? You said that's not your wheelhouse.
Go ahead. Sure.
Let's say that I started to use it, and then let's say you in response said, well, it's not my wheelhouse, but you know what? I hear a lot of bad things about lipopolysaccharides. I think if they're pretty high, that's probably problematic. All right, I'll go with your analogy on that. I would accept that.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, but I would. I would say
what
like,
you're telling me now is that I shouldn't have followed you into this analogy, even if I qualified up front, that I may not know for sure the association of oxidative stress with smoking. But,
correct. You should say that. Listen, I hear people. You could say like, I hear people saying bad things about it, but I actually don't know if they're right or if they're just talking out of their asshole. Like they could be completely. And I would. By the way, I wouldn't form a belief. I wouldn't say Yeah, and I wouldn't have different belief states to it. I would be agnostic on both, or yes on both, or no on both. I would be consistent.
Yeah, I know less about smoking than I do about lipids. Agreed.
So I'll ask the question again, to see if this pushback has changed your view on it at all. In the context of LMA card, when it comes to LDL, wait, Dave, the critique is not that you don't know it. The critique is not you don't know. The critique is that despite the fact that you don't know it, it's forming a symmetry breaker that's changing your beliefs about the two things. Despite the fact that you don't even have reason to believe the symmetry breaker is there. That's the critique. My problem with you isn't that you don't know about oxidative stress. That's fine. My problem is that the view that oxidative stress and what it does, and that interrelationship with smoking, despite not having any reason to believe that it's even there, is forming a difference in belief states. It's like just asserting something and saying it forms a difference in my belief, even though I have no reason to believe that this thing is even there.
Yeah, I still don't follow the point you're making. Are you basically saying that I shouldn't actually be acting on anything that I'm not already an expert in? Or that I shouldn't be entertaining an analogy?
I'm not talking about actions. I'm talking about beliefs. I'm not talking about actions. I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about your beliefs. I'm talking about your methodology of forming beliefs. Look, what I'm saying is, imagine, I'll simplify with the analogy. Is to say, look, do I believe that, let's see, do I believe that damage to the brain can cause autism? And I say yes. And then I say that, do I believe that, let me see, sorry. So I say, let's do it like this. Let's say someone says, I asked, do vaccines cause autism? Right? And they say yes. They say vaccines cause autism. I have the belief that vaccines cause autism. I lean in that direction. Okay? And then I say, okay, well, does an apple cause autism? And they say I lean in that it's not in that direction. Okay? So they have different beliefs about what causes autism and what doesn't cause autism. So I ask, okay, what's the difference that accounts for why you believe that vaccines cause autism and apples do not cause autism? Why do you lean in the two different directions? And then you say, well, I lean in that direction because vaccines have homocysteine in them, and I believe homocysteine causes autism. And then I ask, well, do you actually have any reason to believe there's homocysteine in the vaccine? And do you actually have any reason to believe homocysteine causes autism? And then he says, actually, I'm kind of just speculating about it. I don't actually have any reason to believe that homocysteine causes autism, and I don't actually have any reason to believe that vaccines even have homocysteine in them to begin with. But, I've just heard some things, do you not see the problem here? They're asserting something that's different without any reason to believe that the thing is even different in the first place. The symmetry breaker that's being offered for the difference in beliefs, the individual asserting the symmetry breaker has no reason to believe that the symmetry breaker is even there.
I think you're making this into a false dichotomy now. Now you're taking it from one direction of there's absolutely nothing I've ever seen or read that would lead me to believe what it is that I just stated. Right? That's what you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
No.
No, you said you were giving an example of autism and you were coming with this homocysteine, right? And how much of this was an informed opinion? Information is not it's not a Boolean. It's not you either know everything or you know nothing.
I didn't suggest it was. Wait, why does that have to do with anything? I didn't suggest it was. Look, to whatever degree that people are talking about vaccines, they're talking about smoke. This is this common belief that, a lot of people are saying it. You don't actually know that that's the case. You may not even have any reason to believe that it's the case, unless you think the fact that people are saying it is reason to believe that is the case, which is highly dubious. You can go there, that's fine. There's a response to that too. So the question is, to that person, okay, why do you believe it causes autism? They say, oh, because people are saying it, and they have no other reason for that other than people are saying it. Is that the answer? Because I can have a follow-up question if that's the answer. So
was that my answer though, or was my answer? Yeah. I think it's X, and given if I'm right about it being X, then I think it's Y. Like that's an unacceptable answer.
Wait, what?
Saying, right? Wait. Hold on. If you bring up an analogy and you say, why would, and I give you an answer, but I'm upfront about speculating on the answer. Is it
what reason? Why? Okay, that's fine. Wait. I understand now. So I'm asking you, like, why do you think? Because look, I understand you can be speculating, but some we can agree that some speculations are more reason providing than others, or more reason justified than others. Like you can speculate about a trajectory. That's more reason providing than just speculating that aliens are going to come from the moon tomorrow and are going to feed us all cheese down our throats. Like, not all speculations are created equal. So when you say speculate, I just want to know if you think you have a reason to believe that oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular. That's what I'm cashing out all of this into. Do you have a reason? Do you think you have a reason to believe that smoking increases oxidative stress and oxidative stress increases cardiovascular disease?
Do I have a reason to believe that? Yes.
Okay, what's your reason?
The reason is that I talked to some doctors about it back when my grandfather was having a smoking problem, and I was looking to find a way to convince him to quit smoking.
Okay, cool. And if doctors told you the same thing when you were with your grandfather about LDL, would your beliefs now equalize with LDL and smoking? So if doctors said that, by the way, smoking...
Yes. Doctors told me my whole life, not including the doctors of my grandparents and my parents, that cholesterol is absolutely an independent cause of atherosclerosis.
No, not that it's an independent cause of atherosclerosis. No, just if you were told that LDL increases oxidative stress, and oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular disease. Like you're told this right now by a doctor. Okay? The question is, do you now equalize your beliefs?
Yeah, if I knew nothing about lipids before this moment in time...
No, what you know now. No, I'm not asking about what you know. Stop. I'm not asking you about what you knew, what you would have known before what you know. I'm asking you, with everything is a question to the Dave right now, with all of his beliefs right now. If a doctor comes and tells you that LDL increases oxidative stress, and oxidative stress causes CVD, do you now equate your beliefs?
Given what I know, how do I not draw on an existing understanding?
You can draw. You can.
Okay.
You can.
Then
what's your answer?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
My response would be, I'd be very interested in trying to understand how you come to that conclusion, as I would be asking you right now the same thing.
Would you say that to the doctor? Wait. Stop. You gave it. Your response would be to the doctor. How very interested in how you arrived to coming to that conclusion. Would you say that to the doctor about smoking? If the doctor tells you smoking increases oxidative stress and oxidative stress increases CVD, would you say that to the doctor?
If the doctor told me that right now, I would say that, yes.
Okay, so you would say I'm very...
Actually, I have at conferences. I've been to several conferences over the last several years.
Okay, but in one context, hold on. Hold on. If a doctor comes and tells you about that, wait, stop, Dave, I'm not interested. Dave, I gotta stop you. I'm not interested in the story about when you're 21. Look, if a doctor comes and tells you about LDL and it increases oxidative stress, do you accept that belief in the same way that you accept the belief about the smoking, and do your beliefs about smoking and CVD risk with LDL now equalize? Yes or no?
Yes.
If the doctor comes and tells me that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Why, okay, so it's not...
I'm different now than I was at 20.
Okay, no, I understand. I think that's trivial. I understand that. So why... Okay, so why... No, I understand that. So why do you accept it in the smoking case and not in the LDL case?
How do I Except you're talking about when you were bringing this up as an analogy.
I do accept. You said.
I completed the image. If you think that might be helpful, it's pretty systematic. We'll give you a really clear picture of what he's getting at. It's in general. Can you see this, Avi?
Hold on, let me check.
You on your phone?
Yeah, I'm on my phone.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, can you see it also, Dave?
It's back to outside the context I was discussing. You know, it's if anybody has been listening all the way through.
Wait.
Know that I was. Wait.
But I just came in
just now, including just now when I was talking about oxidative stress as the causal result.
But I'm just trying to explain Avi's line of questioning. If you have a good reply to it, then that's totally fine. But I just want you to appreciate what it is he's doing. So do you see this image?
I did. That's why I went towards oxidative stress. I'm actually trying to pull a productive dialogue out of this. That's why I went to oxidative stress and identify a pathogen.
Dave, you're not following. I'm sorry. You're not following. It's not about equal.
I'm getting cut off for a second when I came in. Yeah, you started talking over me the second I came into the conversation. So if I talked over anyone, sorry, but we're all trying to have a productive conversation, okay? I think that what would be very productive is for you to clearly understand what Avi is trying to do so that you can either produce a response to it or say, you know what, I don't have a response to that right now, I'm going to go think on it. So this image, I'm sure Avi will sign off that this is what he's doing, and this makes it perfectly clear. So you have this open, right, Avi?
Yeah, I have it open.
And Dave, do you have this open also?
I have it open.
Okay. All right. So, you know, and again, not a gotcha. You can go think about all this. You don't have to answer it right now if you can't, but, like, this is just to clarify, okay? So there's two situations. He gives you these two situations, okay? They both have triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50. Now, if there's pushback, just give it after, because I don't know the medical details. I'm just going to explain what he's doing, okay? So the two situations, they have the same variables in place, okay? Triglycerides under 100, HDL over 50. Situation 1, LDL appears in blood. Situation 2, smoke appears in lungs. And the same question is asked in both situations. Do you believe CVD risk goes up? Now, down below, you'll see there's a table, right? And there's some options here. So either you have the belief or you don't have the belief. So we have situation 1 and 2, and you can see that there's going to be a tetrachotomy of options, right? Either you have a belief that in both cases, either you lack a belief in both cases, or you have a belief in one case and not the other, or you lack a belief in one case and not the other, right? Now, if in both cases you have the belief, you've got a consistent position. If in both cases you lack the belief, you've got a consistent position. But if you're in one of these middle options here, where in one case you believe and in the other you don't, right? You're generating different answers under the same circumstances. So he's going to ask for the symmetry breaker. That is to say, what is it that separates those two situations, right? Why do you wear the green shoes on the one day and the brown shoes on the other? So then we get into this dialogue if you take one of those options. So he's going to ask for the symmetry breaker. So you'll say the symmetry breaker is X. Avi's going to say, what's the evidence for X? Do you have evidence for X? And then you have two pathways. You can say yes, and then he says show it. Or you can say no, and then he says, okay, well you have to change your view to one of these consistent positions, or just accept that you're being inconsistent in your epistemic standard. Do you appreciate what he's doing there? Do you get the idea behind the image? It's kind of philosophy, so I know it's not your main thing, but do you understand what it's getting at roughly?
I can appreciate that you're trying to make an effort towards something productive, Isaac.
But can you appreciate what is being said in the image? And thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah. I am trying my best.
I'm genuinely right now kind of in one of those modes where I'm trying to figure out how to steer this towards a direction that's going to be productive. And the challenge in doing that is that you're now disagreeing with me. Both of you are disagreeing with me in what it is that I feel I've stated contextually throughout this conversation. It keeps getting simplified.
Wait, can I correct you there? Just, I'm not making a statement about what you said. I just laid out a series of options. You can pick whatever you want. I'm making no statement about which option you've taken, so don't put me in any camp there. If Avi's doing that, that's on Avi. and he can try to defend it and refer back to your statements or whatever. I'm just laying out a series of options that you have here and showing where it leads.
I'm going to be very real with both of you guys, and that part of the reason I wanted to initiate this conversation today publicly is because I wanted to demonstrate to everybody that actually Avi and I have had many great, very productive conversations. In fact, to the best of my recollection, there's only, except for like one kind of thing, we've generally kept it very respectful. It's not gotten into personal attacks. And I appreciate Avi's style, I appreciate him as a debater. But if I'm being perfectly honest, this may be one of the least productive, this may be the least productive discussion that I've had. And part of the frustration is I pushed a meeting to do this. I originally had a hard stop that was 50 minutes ago. And I feel like probably a better use of my time is to say, I would be fine with us restarting this after apparently this piece of information that's going to be very relevant to this discussion, which is either that I identify how much oxidative stress matters so that we can make use of it as an analogy. I realize that's not your entire point, Avi. You wanted to discuss how much...
Not even close to the point. It's not even remotely close to the point. If you're saying that... Go ahead.
I was going to complete. I realized part of what you were asserting has more to do with me making a comment on it, given what it is that I've already said that I know on it. I'm not sure if I articulated that right, but hopefully... Okay. Yeah, no.
Solely. No, it's not true either. No, it's about your beliefs. Like, the point is, like, the very fact that you're saying that you would want to restart this conversation when you actually have the data shows me you're just not following at all what I'm saying, Dave. Like, you're just not following even remotely. You're not tracking.
Can I say something?
Maybe Isaac can explain. Isaac, you're better explaining it than I am.
It's okay. I think part of the confusion here is that this is actually a bit of a philosophy thing, and I understand that someone who spends their time dealing with health data is going to be like, look, I don't want to get dragged into fucking doxastic states and beliefs and tetrachotomy tables or something. It's like, what the fuck, all that. That's not what I'm about. But the problem is that the statements you're making at a higher level when you're talking about a special science, in this case nutrition, are creating problems at a foundational level. And that ends up leading into the territory of philosophy. And that's why you're getting faced with this kind of problem that maybe you feel is a bit unfair because it's like way out of your wheelhouse and you're not prepared for it. And I think Avi's trying to be very fair about it. But the whole problem is about the problem that you're saying about the information before starting the conversation.
I can cut out there.
Oh, sorry. That's fine. Yep, I'll just back out like 30 words or so. So I think that the problem here is actually, it's at a deeper level than, so I understand you want to talk about a special science. You want to talk about nutrition, right? You don't want to get dragged into a fucking philosophy debate. You don't want to be talking about, some like truth tables and doxastic states. Like, fuck all that. I want to talk about like health shit. I understand. But the problem, and I know this can be super frustrating if someone's focused on higher level questions about the sciences, is that sometimes you make statements at a higher level that actually open you up to criticism on one of these more fundamental levels, right? So that's kind of what's happening here. You're making statements at the higher level about a special science, but Avi's going below that to epistemology, which is one of the main areas of philosophy, logic, metaphysics, epistemology, and logic. He's saying there's actually an epistemic problem that's created by your higher order statements about the special science of nutrition, right? So okay, that's been said. Now, when Avi's getting frustrated with you at the end there, I don't think anyone's trying to be mean. We're all trying to get along and be productive. But the reason why he's saying it's frustrating that you even want to restart the conversation later after going and collecting data on this question is that whether you go and get data is completely beside the point, because right now you have the inconsistent attitudes, right? That's the thing that speaks to the inconsistent epistemic standards, right? The fact that you might find data and then make your way to a consistent position, it's like, okay, but if you had a consistent epistemic standards, then what you do right now in the meantime is say, in the absence of data, I take the position that no, I don't have a belief in both cases, or yes, I do have a belief in both cases.
Right.
So I guess the most productive thing, I honestly think, is to clear up what Avi's attack is here. Even if you're not going to produce an answer to it right now, that's fine. And then, just basically go and think on that and then come back with a ready to reply to that critique.
Right. And in fact, I think
yeah,
let me just interject. I think the least productive thing to do, if you want to make this a zero productive conversation, is to look at the data right now, because this is not even about the data. It's about logical consistency. Now, after we clear up logical consistency, it'd be great to look at the data. But the fact that right now the last thing, counterintuitively, the last thing you actually want to do to make this productive is to restart the conversation after you look at the data, because now the problem that was there is like there's a band-aid on the wound now that's there. Like,
exactly. Right. Yep. Now that you've found some data and we have maybe some basis for setting up a consistent position, it's just on Avi to again dig his way down to somewhere where this inconsistent epistemic standard is sticking its head up again. And then when he finds that, he'll say, okay, I have to go find data again. But it's like, wait, but the whole problem is with the epistemic standard. So this is why, again, it might be frustrating because it's taking it away from the area you focus on. But there's a philosophy problem here, right? It's a question of epistemology. It's a question about logic, right? So really, again, like I just really emphasize, what has to be cleared up is you need to clearly get what the attack is that Avi's making here. So do you understand what this image is getting at, what the pathways are here? And if not, that's fine. Like we can just go through it step by step, and you'll just get the idea of what it is he's getting at.
I think I'm ready to go private with Avi.
Okay. I mean, I hope I haven't frustrated you.
I think that there's a much higher likelihood of productivity if I have a private conversation with Avi than if I continue in this public manner. But I think we all agree that this has been an extraordinary impasse.
I'd suggest that I have like completely and utterly clarified what Avi's doing here, and I bet he would sign off on 100% of this image.
I sign off 100% on the image. Now, I just want to say, Dave, one thing I want to say, Dave, before you interject, I just want to say one thing, that the way I'm acting now is exactly the way I would act in a private conversation with you. Publicity has no difference in impact, because the frustrating part of it is, I can get frustrated sometimes. We have productive conversations when it happens to be that we're in a conversation that you're tracking what I'm saying, and it's not, and when I clear up that you're not tracking, it's like, okay, fine. Like, you actually go back and track it. Like, in this case, I don't feel like you are tracking what I'm saying and you've understood what my actual critique is, and the replies to that seem to suggest that. But time and time again, when I try to get you to understand it, you just produce the same sort of replies that don't seem to address the actual critique. That's why I'm getting frustrated. I'm sorry, and I don't want to get frustrated. I like you.
This is getting recorded, right? I assume it is, or somebody's going to record it.
I also want to go on the record with I like Dave. He seems like a nice guy.
Yeah. I actually don't know if it's recorded or not, and I don't care. Because I act the same way whether things are being recorded, whether they're not being recorded. I have no idea.
No, I know that. Part of the reason I mention that is I'm happy to review this, but I believe there are several different things that I've stated and restated several times over that would then get summarized out. And I don't think it was your intent, Avi, to do that. But there is a point in which I'm just going to say, I just don't want to repeat it again. I really don't want to keep ending up in what I feel like is an unintentional straw man position. It gets too frustrating. There's just a point at which I've got to say, I got to let it go.
Dave, situation, wait, no. That's completely not like, every time you have suggested that I've mischaracterized you, I have backed up and said, okay, until I got to the point where you said it multiple times, you signed off. Okay, try under 100, HDL above 50, LDL in the pure the blood, magic wand, CBD risk goes up. You said, yes, you have a leaning toward that belief. Try under 100, HDL over 50, smoke appears in lungs. Do you have a belief toward it? CBD risk goes up. You said you have a belief toward that direction. With LDL, you said you didn't have a belief toward that direction. You've said it many times. This is recorded. I mean, I hope it's recorded so I can play it back to you.
we're so used to things being recorded that it's natural to think, yeah, it must be recorded. The other thing, Avi, is it's important to like again, the image clears this up, right? There's 4 possible positions, right? It's kind of like if you have 2 light switches, like both on, both off, one on and the other off, the other on and the one off. Like either you have a belief in both cases, you lack a belief in both cases, or you have belief in one, not the other, or you have a belief in the other and not the one, right? The whole idea with this image is laying out a possibility space. Oh, sorry. I was just saying the whole idea with this. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, my bad. But, well, maybe it's not my bad. Maybe it's the internet. Who knows? But, yeah, the whole idea, though, is he's not trying to pigeonhole you into a specific position. He doesn't care how much you change around what you're saying, if you're even changing it. Maybe he's just not understanding you, and you've not changed it at all. Who the fuck knows? What he's doing is laying out a possibilities, right? That's the whole idea. All he's trying to get you to do is sort yourself into one of these boxes in the possibility space. And he's getting frustrated because he's having a hard time doing that. Would that be fair, Avi?
I mean, it seems like I had an easy time doing that, but now he's saying...
Avi, hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I was saying, Avi, the whole idea is you're not trying to... Yeah, Avi, you're not... Yeah, you are far away, he's right. You're not trying to actually slap him with out the possibility space and asking him to place himself within it, right?
Yeah, so that's right. I did think that he did place himself in one possibility, but if I'm wrong, I don't care. Like that, I mean, I do care, but I can do the same. It doesn't matter with respect to my question, because
Right,
I can place it in the other one.
Exactly. So when he says it's a straw man, Avi's not at all committed to characterizing your view one way or the other, right? If he's got it wrong, he's just gonna say, "Oh, okay, sorry, my bad. I just wasn't understanding."
Okay. Can I offer what I think might be a helpful report?
You go for it, but I really think the helpful way forward is just to clearly understand his critique and place yourself in one of these possibility spaces. But sure, go for it.
Can I offer what I think will be a helpful way forward? Let's actually just take this out to be variables. Variables in the blood. Can we go with that? For example, variable X, we'll call it element X, as it increases, associates with cardiovascular disease. Element Y tends to associate with cardiovascular disease as it goes up. Can we start there? Is that possible?
That's not... No, that wasn't my question.
Okay. What's your question?
Okay. My question was...
Dave, he's getting annoyed because he just wants a clear answer to the question that's in the drawing. He's been trying to say the same question for like an hour and a bit. That's why he's getting frustrated.
Okay,
He just wants you to look at that option and just tell him which row of that table you're in.
Can he even see me? Is he looking at the image? Is he able to see it?
He said he was looking at it earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at the image right now.
The questions are straightforward.
I've got to respond to this. I've got to respond via text. 1 second. Okay.
And I want to say also, Dave, I hope you don't feel like you're being badgered down a certain tunnel, because in a sense that's what's happening, but it's because this is actually the question, like, Avi's concerned with here. So it might feel like you're being forced down a path or something, but it's just because that's actually the thing he wants to know about. No one's trying to be, like, unfair or anything.
I am 100% fine with getting onto a path. The whole question of consistency is one that has to do with getting there. The main objections that I have, Isaac, is not... I've actually watched both of you guys in your videos before, and for what it's worth, I find the concept of things like formal logic to be interesting, and for that matter, if I was used to a lot of the terminology that comes around with it, then I would be a lot more comfortable with making use of it, but I also don't want to misuse it either. That's a big part of the problem, right? So, when we're talking about this formally, I want to make sure that... What's that?
Sorry, I cut you off by accident, my bad.
There's also some background noise, something somewhere.
That's on
Sorry,
Avi's
that's me. I'm sorry. I'm not going into the subway because I want to... I can mute my phone, actually. I'm not going to the subway because I want to continue the conversation. I'll mute it.
Sometimes there's delay, so we cut you off by accident. But sorry, what were you saying?
Okay. So I want to walk slowly through this because I think that'll be helpful for everybody. I think that LDL particles, they're in the blood at all times. I think that which can be introduced by smoking may not be in the blood at all times. But I can see that I don't know for sure exactly what things are brought into the blood because it's not my wheelhouse. So of what gets brought into the blood that I speculate I can pick on as one possible inducement of cardiovascular disease is oxidative stress. And as I said earlier in the conversation, this is speculative, but it is something that I'd heard when I was 21 from doctors at that time. I wasn't somebody who was reading into studies or really even cared that much. I was mainly just trying to talk my grandfather into not smoking. So for me, on a 10 scale, that was like a 9 or 10 for me on the evidence chain because I didn't know how to do anything beyond that. So genuinely, go ahead.
Well, sorry to cut you off. You gave the answer in there. So like, if we were to look at the diagram, if you're saying something about oxidative stress, again, I won't be able to process the medical details. I'll have to do that. But what you're doing is you're saying, yes, in one situation I form a belief. No, in the other case I don't. So you're taking a different position in both. And you're saying the thing that makes for the different position is oxidative stress. Would that be accurate, or is that a strong?
No, I think that would be accurate. And I'm going to help. I'll help both of you guys out. Likewise, for the last, 3-4 decades of my life, I would also hear from doctors that cardiovascular disease is at least largely in part caused by LDL cholesterol. That higher LDL causes cardiovascular disease. And I would say, through most of my life, I believe that just as strongly as I did with smoking, resulting in greater cardiovascular disease. Does that help?
Well, I think the most helpful thing, I think what he's going to be interested in, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really just going to be what allows him to tell where you fit in the possibility space. So you did actually answer that, though. You said...
Yeah, I'll just say right now, the first part of what Dave said that allows me to classify him was helpful. The second part about what he believed when he was before that was not helpful, but I already got him intermediate from the first thing.
Okay, so, and then of course, you cut me off once you want, Avi, but of course if he's going to say, so I do have a belief in one situation, I don't have a belief in the other, and the distinction is oxidative stress, then Avi's going to basically, that's the equivalent of saying, okay, the symmetry breaker is X, where X is oxidative stress. So Avi's follow-up question is going to be, what's the evidence that oxidative stress causes CVD? Is that how you're going to frame it, or?
I would say instead of evidence, I would say what's the reason to believe? Does he have reason to believe
that oxidative stress causes higher cardiovascular disease?
That two things are the case. That smoking, it's a conjunction. Your symmetry breaker isn't just that oxidative stress causes cardiovascular disease. It's that smoking causes oxidative stress. And oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular, or smoking increases your oxidative stress, and oxidative stress increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. It's a conjunction of those two things, because obviously if one of those two things aren't true, then the symmetry breaker doesn't work. Because smoking actually has to increase risk of oxidative stress, and oxidative stress actually has to increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. So my question to you is, what reason do you have to believe that the conjunction, that both of those things are the case? That smoking increases oxidative stress, and oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular. What reason do you have to believe that's the case?
Well, I just mentioned that earlier. It came prior from when I was talking to doctors and I was trying to convince my grandfather to stop smoking.
Right. And my response to that is, if you have right now, not before when you were 21, right now, if you have a doctor coming to you and saying that oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular, it increases risk of cardiovascular.
You broke up, Avi. You broke up.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So what I'm saying now is, my response to that is, my question is, if a doctor came and told you the same thing for LDL, not that LDL causes atherosclerosis, that LDL increases risk of oxidative stress, increases your oxidative stress, just like smoking does, and oxidative stress increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, if a doctor tells you that, then presumably, unless you have some evidence to the contrary, then you would
I
have
do.
the same. Then you would have the same
I have lots
reason.
of evidence to the contrary. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What evidence to the contrary do you have that LDL, that waving a line, in the context of, in the context of in the context of, well, in the context of triglycerides less than 100, HDL over 50, what evidence do you have that increasing LDL does not increase oxidative stress?
I see labs daily, probably in the neighborhood of around 8 to 12, some days as much as like 20, I want to say. And in many of those cases,
what labs do you use? What labs are you using to incur oxidative stress?
well, of course, originally I was using ox-LDL, but I don't like ox-LDL as much as I did before. Also, C-reactive protein is known to come up a lot more from oxidative stress. Or do you disagree?
I don't know about. I actually don't know. I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people talk about oxidative stress and they don't know what they're talking about, and they talk about they can end up conflating it with CRP. And maybe I've even done that in this conversation. Or inflammatory markers. I actually really don't. I really don't know if measurements of oxidative stress are tied that closely with inflammation, or you can have inflammation without high oxidative stress. But
there are a lot of acute phase reactants that definitely rise in the presence of extraordinary oxidative stress. There's lots of studies on that.
oh, I'm not okay. I'm interested. Okay, so if it's to the degree of smoking, and you could show that. Okay, fine. So.
Not talking the degree of smoking. I'm just talking even extraordinary. I'm talking even just mildly elevated.
Okay, I'd like to see that. And that you can measure in the blood. So I'd like to see that.
So lean mass hyperresponders, would you expect them to have high C-reactive protein?
Yes.
I don't know.
But you probably are. I mean, you probably are familiar with how much oxidative stress can affect, especially C-reactive protein. It's an extremely sensitive marker.
No, I don't know that. I actually don't. I don't know. When people talk, oxidative stress means a specific thing. It's not the same thing as inflammation. A lot of people conflate inflammation with oxidative stress, and they treat it as like.
And I'm not doing that.
Treat it as like
I'm not doing that at all.
Or they treat it as things that like highly correlate. I don't even know.
No, but oxidative stress can trigger an inflammatory response. We agree on that, yes? Or do you not agree that oxidative stress can trigger an inflammatory response?
I'm sure things can happen. I just actually haven't seen the data showing that it actually does routinely do that. Maybe it does. I'm happy with it if it does, but I actually haven't seen that formally demonstrated.
Okay, that I'm confident I can get your studies on. In fact, I'll bet people in the chat right now can just Google it and find lots in PubMed right now.
Okay, cool. All right, that's fine. Now my question is, your reason to believe that LDL doesn't increase oxidative stress, and oxidative stress. Hold on. So.
Can I help you?
What reason? Wait. What I want to know is what reason do you have to believe that LDL causes increases risk of cardiovascular? Sorry. Oxidative stress increases risk of cardiovascular disease. You answered what the doctor told you. And then I asked you, okay, well, what is the same thing with LDL? You said you have evidence to the contrary. Your evidence to the contrary was your own observations of lab work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Can I make an important clarification?
And I asked, yeah, sure. Okay, sure.
It's an important clarification because it's both going to help you and it's going to keep this on track. I'm not saying that high LDL potentially causing oxidative stress is the mechanism by which high LDL could be the result of higher atherosclerosis. That's important because that would put me in too advantageous of a situation because that's easily shown in the existing lean mass hyperresponder studies. And then I would be feeling super confident right now that everything was fine, right? That's not the case. It's quite possible that there's the development of atherosclerosis at large scale without there being oxidative stress. That's possible. So I should emphasize that first. I think that the emphasis of oxidative stress as it related to smoking was kind of what you're wanting to corner me on is why it is that I would think.
I don't want to corner you on it.
I meant it in a fun, ribby way. Okay, I didn't actually mean it in like you're dissing me, right? But in effect, what you're saying is to be consistent. Why would I think that let me be even more specific. Why would I think reactive oxygen species at a extraordinary quantity would potentially result in higher atherosclerosis? But why would I be unsure about why LDL particles at an extraordinary quantity would not possibly result in atherosclerosis? Would that be a fair way of stating it?
Well, more purpose would be why would you be as confident as you are that oxidative stress causes increased risk of CVD, and that you don't have any leaning, or you do have a leaning against the notion that increasing LDL increases oxidative stress.
Well, so on the first one, I would say my level of confidence, I think I've well expressed through this conversation. On a 10 scale, it's not a 10. So as far as how much smoking actually increases oxidative stress and to what degree that is the agent of initiation for atherosclerosis is something I would need to look into more, but do I feel that that is probably the case? At least enough to where I would mention that as what I think to be the agent of change, but again, with that qualification. In the case of the LDL particle count, I would expect to see an inflammatory response. Atherosclerosis, as you know, is an inflammatory disease. But that doesn't bring me to a level of confidence to where I could be, saying, oh, I'm not cautiously optimistic, I'm categorically optimistic. I think there's no problem here. I think at a population level, everyone's going to be fine. Then I wouldn't be doing this.
Where we are in the conversation is the breaker you have with the doctor telling you that the inflammation, the doctor telling you the oxidative stress is caused by smoking. You have reason to believe that, but because you don't have counter evidence. But in the case with LDL causing oxidative stress, you have counter evidence. That's the breaker that's relevant here. Everything else isn't relevant to the question. So you've answered that. And my question was, what's the evidence? What's the counter evidence? Now you said the counter evidence was the personal labs. Now I asked you, what personal labs form the counter evidence? You said what? HSCRP? OxLDL?
Yeah, you're talking acute-phase reactant assays?
The only thing you've said that I'm aware of that form the evidence that you've done in the anecdotes that measure, as many as they may be, are OCT and CRP. There may have been others, but there are missing. So my question is,
there are other, if you want just other markers that oxidative stress can impact, I can do that. It's just C-reactive protein is my favorite because it's a very high sensitivity, non-specific inflammatory protein.
Okay, so what I want to know. So here's what I want to know. So I want to know. I want to know two things. I want to know what basis you have to believe, or what reason you have to believe that CRP is what degree that correlates with oxidative stress, like however you mean that. And then what I want to know is what labs have you done that actually give you reason to believe that increasing LDL does not increase oxidative stress? So those two things. So you can give me those anecdotes. You've done it many, many times. So I want to know if I would like to know if those anecdotes actually give reason to believe that. And I also want to know if you actually have any reason to believe the thing you're measuring is actually tracking what you say is tracking.
Yeah, but again, to the degree in which they are still anecdotes, I would prefer clinical data. So I'm very upfront.
I wasn't contending that. Obviously, your reason. Look, when you're leaning, clearly, I think it's clear that the difference, if there's any difference in your leaning here, it's going to be like a 1 in a 1 out of 10 at best. Like, at least that's what I would do. Maybe you have a difference in standard. Like, if I was, like, forming a difference in belief about these two questions, and what I had to, like, the reason for my symmetry breaker turned out to be, like, a doctor told me one time, and, like, I did a bunch of anecdotes with lab tests. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, the confidence, like, if we were to measure, like, a needle and how far it's moving, like, the two needles would be very close to each other. Like, the degree my leaning for smoking.
But that's not the only evidence you're going off of. Bobby, this is the reason why I went and got NHANES.
So there's more. Okay, so there's more. Wait, hold on.
No,
there's
yeah,
more. It's not just oxidation. So then what else is there?
Well, that's why all roads lead to all-cause mortality. I wanted to find out how much there was an association with it. Before I even
mortality wasn't the question, Dave. You're off topic.
Okay, you were asking what additional evidence I had found to be relevant, right?
Relevant to the question that was
relevant
asked.
to the question.
All-cause mortality is not relevant. The question was about CBD.
Yeah. So let me save you a whole lot of time. I think this is where you're driving to, and it's something I've stated many times on Twitter before. In fact, I think I stated it earlier in this conversation. If you're comparing a likewise cohort where one has the lower LDL and one has the higher LDL, the one with the lower LDL is going to be more likely to not die of cardiovascular disease.
That's not the question. Like, can we post the image again? Because the image was the question. You gave the evidence as the symmetry breaker as oxidative stress. Now, we went and established that even if that turns out to be a symmetry breaker, the leaning in those beliefs would be very, very close to each other. Clearly, we're talking about anecdotes and what a doctor. Now, you tried to say, okay, well, there's other things I'm basing off to make the needles go further away. And I asked what they were. So what other things are there other than your difference in belief about oxidative stress, which I haven't seen data for so far, but let's just for the sake of the argument say it's there, based on anecdotes and whatever things in the lowest tiers of the evidence hierarchy we can imagine. What else is there to move the needles further away from each other? For those two specific questions that are in the graphic, let's get the graphic.
Okay, I'm looking at the graphic. Avi, I'm going to help you. I'm looking at the graphic. I believe that in situation 1, where LDL is where the resulting markers of LDL are higher in one group versus lower in the other group, the risk of dying
That's not situation 1. That's situation 1 is you wave the wand and you make LDL appear more in the blood.
Okay, so more LDL appears in the blood. And
Yep.
You're asking why it is that I wouldn't think it would be more likely there to be higher cardiovascular disease risk.
I'm asking you why so you see the different options you can take in terms of your belief? I want you to imagine it as like a needle. So you have it, there's like in the middle is agnostic, and the needle can move toward I believe it's the case. The needle can move toward I believe it's not the case. Like, are you picturing that in your mind right now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So for situation 1, your needle can move. It can stay right where it is at agnostic. It can move a little bit toward believing it is the case. It can move toward believing yes. It can move toward believing no. In situation 2, the same thing can happen with your needle. It can move toward yes. It can move toward no. Now, my question to you, Dave, is if what we've been positing to move the needles in different directions to account for the difference in belief, because you do have a difference in belief on this, you clearly fall into the third category. Agree? Third category most accurately described. In situation 1, you lean toward no. Situation 2, you lean toward yes. Now, where we got the conversation was, even if the breaker you posited was actually a breaker, it would clearly move the needles in different directions to a very low degree, unless you value things at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy. So great. You responded by saying, oh, but there's more. There's more evidence. And now I just want to know what that more evidence to move the needles even further away is.
I've been staring at the graphic, and I'm trying to understand what the needle between these two parts are that you were discussing. So you're talking between situation 1.
Yeah. So you know how? So the graphic it's binary. So you see how it's binary? It's yes and no. But in reality, we acknowledge that you don't have to 100% believe something or 100% disbelieve something, right? You acknowledge that there's like a needle that can like lean towards something.
It's actually set up to account for that. It's not set up as believe or disbelieve. It's set up as believe or lack belief. So it accounts for that.
I mean, even so, Isaac, like you can have.
Yeah, no, okay.
Yeah, but even there's like a spectrum between those two things, Isaac. You can have a needle that, for lack of belief, like if you have the belief a very little bit versus you very strongly believe.
Oh, you're saying you want to go into, you could say, yes, I believe one, no, or yes, I believe both, but still there could be an inconsistency because of the degree of belief.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you could easily set that up in the same way, though, where you could just set up it doesn't have to become some weird spectrum-y vague shit. You can just be like, look, you're either both are in the same position of belief, both are in a different position of belief. You can still set up 4 options like that.
Yeah. So Isaac, where we are in the conversation is positing a breaker, and rather get into the weeds about whether that breaker is even real. Because it may be tenuous, but even if it turns out to be the case, the breakers are all at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy. So you're tracking. So one example was like in favor of the yes, in favor of the no in the first situation, or Dave's lab said he's been doing as anecdotes, and then in the favor of no in the second, yes in the second situation was a doctor told him that. So what I said to Dave is even that if these are breakers,
It's not a doctor, it's multiple doctors.
multiple doctors, fine.
Anyway,
Go
ahead.
Doesn't matter. Like, it's still going to be at the bottom of the evidence hierarchy. So
it's kind of funny. Just as a funny aside, it's funny because I never would have thought someday in the future this would actually be an extremely relevant and recurring talking point in some debate that had a whole bunch of formal logic asides in it. But anyway,
Isaac,
go ahead.
So Isaac, what I said was that even if that's a breaker,
I mean, that is kind of funny.
Yeah.
It is. It's funny.
What I said was, Isaac, was that if that was a breaker, even presumably if he adheres to an evidence hierarchy, a standard evidence hierarchy, then the difference in the needles would be very little. In other words, it may be true that you lean towards one and not the other, but the degree to which you lean towards one and not the other would be very close to each other, regardless. Like if you were to imagine, Isaac, a needle.
Yeah, you don't have to explain it further. I got the idea. It's like, yeah, I mean, say that you appeal to some symmetry breaker, but symmetry breaker's low on the hierarchy, the degree to which it breaks the symmetry will be small, so you won't have much of a difference in the degree of belief in virtue of the breaker. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the needle.
Can I add to
Now
that?
he said. Now Dave answered it already. You answered it already. You said there's more. And I want to know what
Can I add to that?
Yeah, what's
Actually,
more? Yeah, sure.
this will totally help. So yes, let me see if I can restate this the way that I believe you mean it, which is if we've got this needle and when it's just straight up and down, and what that means is it's a total I don't know, and it's analog, it can go towards I think not versus I think so, and if it's all the way to the max on one direction or the other, then it's an absolute belief, right?
Right.
And at the time in which I'm hearing from a few doctors about smoking that and then taking back to my grandfather, the needle is maxed out at I believe that I'm right that smoking's going to kill you, Dad, or Grandpa, right? And so let's say that it goes up to a 10. At that point in time, it was like a 9. Now, this may be relevant to you, but as I've now gotten back into the research, even though I do believe smoking is deleterious, that being the means by which I would learn what I learned does subtract my degree of certainty, which is why I would even qualify what I said earlier, is that I would say, you know what, actually, I don't even want to make a statement of the degree of certainty I would have had when I was 21 to today, because I really do want to look at the studies to be able to qualify that more effectively. So
Would you go as far as to say that it just wouldn't give you a leaning even until you've looked at the studies?
I would say it gives me enough of a leaning in that one of the doctors I talked to was a bit more of a geek, and I think he probably knew enough to be able to speak to me that a lot of the things I was reflecting on later became somewhat meaningful in what I was learning about oxidation since. That's the irony is I have learned a lot about how oxidation affects, for example, lipid proteins. But to what degree it's introduced externally, such as through smoking, I don't really know that much. That's not my wheelhouse. But do I feel like I could say enough to where I'd be like, I think it's probably oxidative stress? And yeah, but it was with that same degree of effectively what it was that I was told before.
So, Avi, what is it that you're trying to get now? You're saying like, okay, I'm gonna grant the breaker instead of getting into a whole argument about whether the breaker exists, but just say that it only accounts for the slightest tiny degree of breaking, so we shouldn't have any confidence. Is that where you're going?
Exactly, and it seems the way that Dave speaks, it seems the way that the difference he has a difference in confidence greater than what would seem to be justified of a difference in breaking, or what he presumably would hold if he held to any evidence hierarchy that this evidence was valid. So
an interesting question would be if the degree in breaking, like, does he think this doctor's more of a nerd than you? Could you just reverse the degree in breaking by using your own doctorly self to make a statement in the opposite position, and then we're back to ground zero?
That's an
serious question, actually. Because doesn't that ground the whole thing? I mean, back to the zero.
That doctor is no longer with us, so I don't. I mean, I had my 21-year-old.
Do you take him to be more reliable than Avi?
Do I?
You won't hurt Avi's feelings. He doesn't get offended very easily. I'm wondering if you take that doctor to be more reliable than Avi.
No, if Avi right now told me, no, Dave, I've looked at the research and I'm quite confident that smoking does not have any impact on oxidative stress, I would probably take, given what I know of Avi, and given what I know of that prior doctor, I would take Avi's word for it because I think I respect Avi a bit more, and I also know his expertise kind of bounces around this area just a little bit more than I think that doctor's doing.
Sure, and what if he just said, I just don't, I mean, I don't think that there's a reason to have a leaning one way or another. Then would you take on that view of his?
If Avi said that, sure. But
Okay,
is it something Avi feels confident enough to say that I wouldn't be able to find research otherwise? Here's what I think I want to answer that I think you're leaning towards, which is, would I take Avi's word enough to then do no further research on my own?
No, that's not what I said. So the whole thing is, like, this pathway is not necessary, right? He can argue with you on the other pathways, but this is one of those, like, kind of like when you're doing math problems, sometimes there's, like, a speedy way that sometimes applies. This is, like, one of those things. So if you, just to be clear, Avi, when it comes to the oxidative stress thing, you just take the view that there's not a clear reason to believe it one way or the other? Is that where you're at?
in terms of oxidative, yes, but I just want to say that I haven't done a deep dive into the literature about that.
But had the other doctor done a deep dive into it?
Maybe he did, I don't know.
But does Dave have any reason to think that?
The doctor told me that he did. I wasn't standing over his shoulder, and I don't really know what that constitutes, because I've now learned a lot of times doctors will say things with confidence to... Yeah,
if Avi were to look at it and then say, all right, well, I've looked at it, and I now take the view that there's not really a basis to have to think this about oxidative stress, then you would be at the epistemic neutral point. You'd have no reason to believe it any more than you would to disbelieve it, right? There's a doctor on one side, a doctor on the other.
Yeah, but again, you're making a comparison between two different doctors as opposed to whether or not I have the option of doing further research. Like if this is one of those...
Just set that aside and say you're isolated in, like, you know, the limbo for the rest of your life, and the only other piece of data you get is Avi says, yeah, right, then you just be at the neutral point.
Avi, I hope you didn't screw me. I hope you gave me the right piece of information there. That was my grandfather's favorite doctor.
No, I'm not, I don't have confidence, and I haven't done a deep dive on the topic. But look,
But you were, but can we concede something? You were answering me in that moment based on not having done a deep dive, based on what surface knowledge you had, right?
No,
That's what happened.
I didn't make a claim. I asked. No, I didn't answer. I didn't make a claim. I was answering you, but I wasn't asking. I was providing a question. I never made.
I thought you were arguing back. I thought when I mentioned oxidative stress, you were arguing back as to whether I think you said the data was very tenuous, right?
No, I said no. I didn't say that. I would never say that. what I did say is that a lot of people throw around oxidative stress, and they don't know what they're talking about. And I don't know if that's, and what is tenuous is that oxidative stress is what is really can be shown to cause, and not just be confounded to causing cardiovascular. That I say is tenuous. In terms of smoking increasing oxidative stress, no, I don't. That may not be tenuous. That may be tenuous. I haven't done a deep dive. But what I do think is tenuous. So that I never said that. What I did say is that oxidative stress causing CBD, that is actually, I do think that's actually very tenuous. Like, obviously, if you get to some level of oxidative stress, like, all sorts of bad things can happen, but I'm just abnormal and beyond the normal oxidative stress causing CBD, and that's the link for say, rather than any founder that comes with that. I think that is very tenuous.
If what it's worth, I agree with that approach. I mean, at a minimum, we want to be able to see if there's something. So, here, let me actually help you on that. You can have oxidative bursts that come from immune cells that could be relevant to the total metric of the oxidative stress that's being detected, right?
Yeah.
So there could be something that's the root cause that actually results in what is the oxidative stress, where the oxidative stress is being mistaken.
But then we're back to the problem, Dave. Because we're back to, because you said oxidative stress is the symmetry breaker, and then I asked you why reason you have to believe that oxidative stress causes CBD, and then you said a doctor told you. And then I'm a doctor telling you that it's tenuous that oxidative stress causes CBD.
Sorry, you're done with what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't see what the breaker is. I don't see any reason why you would have to have the breaker.
The breaker bit. Oh, so you lost me.
What is the breaker between why the needle moves in one direction in one context, but not in the other context? Let's just get the image up again.
Okay, if a doctor tells me something, is it going to move the needle for me? Yes. How much does it move the needle is relevant, or it isn't?
Okay, Dave, here. I'm a doctor, I'm telling you the following. It's tenuous that oxidative stress decreases your risk for CBD.
So what he's doing, Dave, is he wants to just erase your symmetry breaker, right? If you're going to appeal to like what's, I'm sure you'll agree, it's like a very like weak symmetry breaker. You just want to say, doctor told me once. Then Avi's just like, oh, well, hey, I'm a doctor, so I just coincidentally can just be a doctor telling you the opposite, and then we've got, the symmetry breaker's not there anymore because you've had a doctor in each direction, right? So that takes you back to the neutral line.
I hate to keep bringing this up. There's multiple doctors. I'm proud, the 21-year-old in me.
I can give you multiple doctors.
But I went to multiple doctors. So, anyway, getting back to my original point that I made earlier, I already agreed. But again, getting back to what I said earlier, I already agreed that I would take you as a trusted source if all I had was it being between you and that doctor that I talked to at 21. Particularly given at 21, I wasn't asking the best questions either. Does that?
Okay, but then the problem. But then the problem is that you have different beliefs without a symmetry breaker.
Hey,
you're in the same
from
problem.
a doctor is something that I'm asking that you're an expert in, or at least have some expertise in, should move the needle, shouldn't it?
I'm asking what your belief is right now. Right now, like, Dave, I'm getting frustrated because it seems like whenever we get in this, like, not whenever, but like right now we're getting conversations. It seems like you're not linearly following where the dialogue is going in the conversation. The whole purpose of me doing this is to go back to that image and say, okay, the symmetry breaker you offered before, it's not there anymore, or at least it's not clear that it's there anymore. And so why do you have the different beliefs? Now, if you want to say there's something else than oxidative stress, fine. But it's clear that oxidative, at this point, not when you were 21, but at this point, it's clear that oxidative stress is not the relevant breaker for why that accounts for why you have different beliefs. If you still do have them in a different context.
To restate, I do think oxidative stress at a extraordinary dose-dependent level will result in higher atherosclerosis.
Why?
Is that what you feel I'd change positions on? I'm not sure I follow.
Why?
I think the oxidative stress, as measured by any of these, what I think it is tenuous. Is the idea that's been claimed that oxidative stress per se, at higher than normal level, as opposed to any of the other confounders, causes atherosclerosis. There's a lot of papers you may find that say it, but if you actually look at the data and the trials that are done trying to isolate oxidative stress, they come out unimpressive at all, if not null. In fact, some of them show that it may be the case that oxidative stress may be preventative of cardiovascular disease, based on our interventional data with antioxidants, per se, which with antioxidant supplementation. Now, there are problems with that. But the overall view of the literature is that oxidative stress, it's very tenuous to say that causes cardiovascular.
Okay. Let's say that I have no choice, I cannot look at any further research, and I have to take somebody's word for it. I've already stated, if I had no choice, I would take your word for it, and that would move my needle.
Cool. But now we're back in the original question with the graphic. When it came to the graphic, in situation 1, where is your needle, and where is situation 2? Where is your needle? So
right, because just think about where you're at right now. Right now, you're in the limbo. Remember, like we agreed it would be funny. Like, yeah, you can go do your own research, but currently, those are the only bits of data you have.
Yeah, and I've answered. So if it's the only bits of data I have, if I have no choice, but to go either by the doctor I talked to when I was 21, the geeky one, and not disregarding the other doctors, would I still think that he was a better expert than Avi? I would right now, I would go with Avi. I would actually think that probably Avi is more on track if I had no choice but to do any further research.
So right, so right now, even if after this conversation you go and do research and immediately change your view, right now you're actually in a position where you should say that there's not a symmetry breaker in terms of oxidative stress. Which would take you back to the question.
Which would take you back to the original question of why you think have a different belief in smoking and LDL with the graphic.
Before going to the original question, just make it clear. Right now, since we're in the limbo, right, you haven't done further research, and you have Avi saying something on one side and the other doctor on the other, and you even said Avi's more trustworthy, right? You currently, in this exact moment right now, you can't appeal to the oxidative stress symmetry breaker, right?
I'm giving you guys a heads up that I'll give this like another 15 minutes. It would be cool if we ended up talking about something different, but I feel as if it is interesting that I feel as though we keep kind of circling back to this a lot.
Absolutely, it's his main point.
It's the central point I'm trying to get, and it seems like you've been. I'm not saying you're intentionally skirting around this thing, but it just doesn't seem like you're following what the central point is.
Let's just stay on the point because we're right at
we're right on it. Let's not go
right now. So if we only have 15 minutes, let's not go into talking about the conversation.
Okay,
let's just hammer this last thing out, right? So
okay,
right now in this second, right now, this moment here, you have a doctor on one side, a doctor on the other. So there's not a reason, and you said you trust Avi more actually. So there's not a reason to think currently in this second right now, right, that the oxidative stress symmetry breaker works, right?
But you changed it, not the oxidative stress symmetry breaker, because I don't know what that means. Symmetry breaker I know is a term you guys both use a lot. But I don't know if that has a larger formal logic context to it. I don't know. I don't know what symmetry breaker.
Avi, I'm gonna miss the medical framing. It's that oxidative stress.
Let me put it in what I think.
Wait, one sec. Avi, what's just the exact framing on that? Because it'll just be way quicker if you do it this way. What's the exact framing on the proposition that you're trying to get him to be agnostic on? Because he's got a doctor on each side of it. That oxidative stress